Welcome back to the John Fredericks Radio Show. This is Mike Rubino, guest hosting for the Godzilla of the Truth, John Fredericks. We are joined now by a dear friend of mine, Tony Abboud, the Executive Director of the Vapor Technology Association, protecting vaping interests and vapors across the country. Tony, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Of course. Well, at first, I think congratulations are in order. You, I think, single-handedly saved vapors who use an open system and some closed systems. They care about their flavors. They're single-issue voters. Here in Virginia, we have vape shops that dominate Main Street USA all across Virginia. So tell us about, the last couple months. What has the vaping industry gone through, and what does the vaping industry have to go through over the next couple months?
Well, we have, first of all, I appreciate the compliment, but there's no way that I can take credit for that. We have, as an association, worked diligently over the last many years to kind of promote responsible regulation in this industry. And we're fighting uphill against a lot of forces that want to kind of shade the truth and kind of and disregard the facts. But really what it comes down to is this last few months have been an incredible showing of just the support, the organic support behind this particular product. If people don't know, vapor products are being used by 10 to 14 million adult consumers around the country, the overwhelming majority of whom are trying to quit smoking. They've tried for years and years and years and have failed at every turn. Anybody who's smoked, like I have, and tried to quit and failed multiple times know exactly what I'm talking about. And so these folks have really found something that has altered their lives. And so they have stood up to fight for it and let their voices be heard, and in Virginia and all around the country.
It's really something to behold, and I think what's so important is that the talking point that doesn't necessarily always get out there, and that's that vaping is 95% safer than smoking, and that's done by the Royal College of Medicine in England.
Yes, I mean if you listen to just the media here, mm-hmm. you are being told that vaping is as dangerous as cigarettes, which is an absurd notion. Because there is no science that supports that notion. By contrast, as you just mentioned, the Royal College of Physicians in England, as well as the equivalent of the Department of Health and Human Services, the actual government in the United Kingdom, has decided that vaping is 95% safer, if not even safer than that. So much so that they are promoting e-cigarettes to help people quit each year now. They are finding more and more people quitting smoking in England, which has a huge smoking problem like in the United States. But they are promoting the use of the product as opposed to what you hear from the U.S. public health establishment who are trying to denigrate it and push it down.
Well, let's talk about this health concern. There was a study recently on heart attacks that was recently withdrawn from the Journal of the American Heart Association. I believe this has to do with vaping. Would you mind breaking that down for the listeners here?
So this is a probably the worst case and classic example of the manner in which research, which is being funded by the FDA and HHS, is being misused. There are, without question, there are institutions and researchers that have a slant. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, a study was published in the esteemed Journal of the American Heart Association by one of the leading anti-e-cigarette researchers. And I say that because if you look at his entire body of work, there is no question that is his mission.
Right.
And this study which concluded that vaping is twice as likely to give you a heart attack as smoking, was published in this esteemed journal. After it was challenged by other public health experts based upon the data, what we found out was the fact that these people in the study that had heart attacks did in fact have those heart attacks, but they did so 10 years before they ever started vaping. And yet this particular scientist was able to publish a study in the journal saying that vaping was the cause of their heart attacks. Now, that is just outright basic scientific fraud, frankly, is perhaps one word to consider if those facts are true. The journal itself had to retract the study and publish a statement, and it's just a complete black eye for public health. And so when those stories are being put out there at critical times when policymakers are considering what to do with the segment, and those are the kinds of stories that gain traction in the national media, it's no wonder that people have this mistaken belief about the relative risks.
But it's also
vaping.
It's no surprise. We're watching Michael Bloomberg dump $450 million into his primary campaign for the Democratic nomination for president. He's also dumped $500 million into an anti-vaping effort. I mean, you are going up against a billionaire who's decided that this is going to be the hill he dies on. And unfortunately, the powers that be, all of which want to disseminate what I believe to be misinformation about vaping, because at the core of the matter, you're helping people quit smoking. And the President of the United States, while he initially was going to enact a flavor ban, he retreated away from that because I think everyone understands it. Politically speaking, it's silly because vapers care about vaping and they're single-issue voters. But more importantly, this is a safe alternative to smoking. And here in Virginia, the overwhelming amount of people that I talked to were diametrically opposed to that flavor ban. Now, Tony, I have 5 more minutes with you, and I want to dive into what's coming up down the pike. I, being a swamp creature, just happen to know about it, but if you can handicap it for the listeners here in Virginia, the PMTA process. This is government at its absolute worst. It kind of makes me sick to my stomach. You have 4 minutes. Tell us about PMTA. What is it? How can we stop it? How can we join your army?
Well, I think the easiest way to describe it is that this is a regulatory process that was imposed in the last administration, and it is one that has given no thought to treating this new 21st century technology as a technology. Instead, what it's trying to do is it's trying to treat this 21st century technology as the 19th century cigarette. Mm-hmm. So what it requires is this long, drawn-out, opaque, multi-million-dollar, multi-year process of application process that will effectively put a large number of small businesses out of business. And it's a process that was designed for the biggest cigarette companies in the world. And so for that reason, those companies have no problems with complying with a process like that.
Well, they probably have the bank reserves to do so. I know small businesses don't.
Right. When you have the process which requires, for example, the expenditure of $500,000 to $1 million per product, and by product I mean every iteration of the product, whether
strawberry kiwi, strawberry lime, lemon lime.
Not exactly, not even that, but even at every different nicotine level. So you're talking about if you have a company that sells 200 to 300 different SKUs, we're talking about millions upon millions of dollars just to give the FDA data and information, which the FDA will take into account in deciding if and how it wants to grant your application. And that's one of the biggest problems. This is not a regulatory process that says if you comply with this process, you will actually get an approval. This is a process which says just give us a bunch of information, spend the millions of dollars, and we'll get back to you in a year and let you know whether or not you're going to be able to continue to sell a product. So we have a scenario where we have been asking for and requesting regulation of this industry, but we need regulation that makes sense for a new technology, not just one that's a kind of a square peg being jammed into a round hole.
Well,
And
regulation for regulation's sake never works, right? That's just anti-American.
I think that's generally true, and that's the same reason that bans never work. And that's why it was so important that the administration recognized that an outright ban on flavors was not a smart policy move. It was not a smart economic move because it would have shut down close to 14,000 small businesses. And our concern was that the effort and the thought and the rationale thinking that went into making that policy where the administration decided not to ban flavors in all products, that work will be lost because if we move forward without any sort of relief or accommodations for small businesses with this PMTA process that you mentioned, we'll see a large swath of businesses unfortunately closing. And it will be, I think, a detriment to this industry when you have fewer choices, less competition, and only larger players controlling a marketplace. That's not an American marketplace as we've all grown to know and love.
Right. Well, Tony, it's been a pleasure having you on. You're fighting for small businesses. You're fighting for vapors. You're doing just good American work. How can people follow you? Is there a website that they can go to? How can they get involved?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Our handle is @VaporTechAssoc. And you can also follow us online at our website, which is vaportechnology.org. We have many, many battles ahead of us, but we're having an impact, and we have so many committed business owners throughout this country, as well as millions and millions of vapors throughout this country that are saying, this is a choice. We need to have this choice available to us, and we're going to keep fighting for those choices.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Tony Abboud, Executive Director of the Vapor Technology Association.